You are tuning into BDI Weekly, the official podcast of Best Doctors Insurance.
Este es el programa de Best Doctors Insurance.
Here, we discuss the best in health insurance.
Los temas más interesantes de salud médica.
Medical mysteries, diagnosis, and world topics.
Best Doctors Insurance. En usan y médica.
Good day, everybody. This is the official BDI podcast, el programa oficial de Best Doctors Insurance, and we're ready to start a brand new episode. Aquí arrancamos con un episodio nuevo. And on the show today is a star of the #1 Netflix show, Diagnosis, the associate professor of medicine at Yale University and a health columnist for the New York Times Magazine, Dr. Lisa Sanders. Doctor, I'm a fan. I've been watching you. I believe in what you're doing. Thank you very much for being here.
Wow, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a huge fan of this organization.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. Medical excellence is really what we're all about, you know, like as you know, and that goes the same for you, because I know that what you care about the most is finding the answers to these diagnoses, understand why things are happening, and that's why, you know, again, it's a great honor that you're here with me, today. If you have an opinion or a question, contact us here at bestdoctorsinsurance.com. Tienes un comentario, contáctanos en la página de web. So, Dr. Sanders, let's kick off this episode by discussing your medical journey a little more in length. How did you begin your career at Yale, and with your patients through the years, and how did you end up at this juncture of being an expert as far as diagnosis?
I fell in love with diagnosis very early on in my medical education. When I came to medical school at the age of 36, and after covering medicine for television, for CBS News for years and years. And so I thought, when I came to medical school, I thought I understood medicine, how medicine works. But I realized when I started my clerkships, where you actually get to see doctors in actions, that I understood nothing. I thought that diagnosis was like the multiplication tables. We all memorize those multiplication tables, and 4 times 6 is always 24, no matter what. And so I thought that diagnosis was like that. I thought that diagnosis was like math, that a fever and a rash would always be shingles or,
right,
chicken pox or one specific thing. But of course, a fever and a rash, that could be anything. It could be the measles. It could be the first signs of a cancer. It could be an allergy. It's so many things that it could be. And
right,
once I realized that it wasn't math, I was totally engrossed. It wasn't math. It was Sherlock Holmes. Thinking was everything. Right.
It's all a deeper investigation. With the patient.
Absolutely. With the patient and their illness and their history and, their body.
Right. And by the way, that's interesting. One thing you said there, that it's also a teachable opportunity. You just said you started the medical journey at age 36. Now, a lot of people believe that may be sort of too old, but that goes to show it's just not true. You can always do whatever, you want to do and whatever you're confident about, and anything that you're really passionate about. So that's very telling. Actually very interesting, you as a person, to do that, because I know a lot of people would probably feel discouraged and not want to take on, really such a massive career later in life. So I commend you for that. Wow.
Well, I think that, my grandmother was working until she was in her mid-80s. So I felt like I had plenty of time.
Yeah. Mid-80s, huh? So, tell me more about your Emmy Award-winning career, over at the networks. And what was that like? How did that prepare you for where you are today?
Well, I think there's a lot of similarities between being a reporter and a producer and being a doctor. As it turns out, both reporters and doctors can ask just about any question shamelessly, and people will actually answer them.
Right.
In real life, that's not the
Right.
case. You can't
Right.
just go up to people that and say, "Excuse me, do you have sex with men, women, or both?" It's just not a question that you ask in polite society, but, you know, I ask it of all my patients when I first get to know them, when I first meet them. So I think that there are a lot of ways that being a reporter and being a doctor are very similar. I think we do important things, but the most important thing that doctors do is get the story. The most important things that reporters do is get the story. So the story is the starting point in medicine for diagnosis and then therapy and then getting better. So I think they're important parallels, but I like what I do with the story even more as a doctor than I did as a reporter.
Right. Yeah, it's like if you seek, you could probably find it, right? You got to ask the right questions and do your due diligence, you know?
You have to ask the right questions. You know, people ask me, when will AI take over diagnosis? And you know what? AI is not going to take over diagnosis anytime soon. You know what? We have seen the device that's going to take over diagnosis. Did you ever watch Star Trek? You know, that tricorder thing that they hold over patients and tells what?
Yeah, it tells you, right?
That's going to be artificial intelligence. But until we have something that can actually see in the body, then we have to depend on people to tell us how they feel.
Right. And honestly, you know, after watching your show, or actually beginning to watch, you know, the show, right away, some of the cases are like really heart-wrenching. There's some of the cases there, you know, like some of those you know, illnesses I've never seen, I've never heard of. I had no, you know, like I didn't even think that stuff was possible. But the one that really got me was a veteran, right? You know,
really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the one that I felt it the most right there, and I said, wow. You know, so it makes you understand that it's really important stuff, and it's really important work. And it's good as someone like you is doing that. Wow. But I'm sure that people have asked you, you know, like, well, you're welcome, absolutely. Yeah, and I imagine people have asked you so many times, what's missing, you know, like in the medical field for doctors to have a better handle on developing, you know, the right diagnosis?
Well, I think, you know, to be fair, most of the time doctors make the right diagnosis the first time you see a patient. You know, a friend of mine, Hardeep Singh, looked at patients, primary care patient doctor encounters, and counted up the times where the wrong diagnosis was made or no diagnosis was made, and how many times versus how many times the right diagnosis was made. And really 94% of the time people came out with the correct diagnosis after a single encounter with their doctor. You know, I mean, most people have what most people have. And, you know, most doctors are pretty good at figuring out what most people have. We have a lot of experience with that. It's when you get to the strange things or the unusual presentations of something that might be common that you get into trouble. I think one of the difficulties is that medicine has grown so huge that it's almost impossible for any single doctor to know everything. I mean, we all know doctors that have been in the business for a really long time and who appear to know everything. That's great.
Right.
But, you know, they're at the, you know, they're not at the end of their careers, but they've had a long time to put that all together. There's no way that you can just study your way and know everything. So, you know, it's difficult. One of my suggestions is that, especially for rare or unusual diseases, is that there be a specialty just devoted to difficult diagnoses. It's a whole different group of diseases that we would all know. I mean, now, most medical doctors are experts in chronic diseases because those are the real killers of Americans. Right. You know, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, lung disease. Those are the things that really kill Americans. And you have to know a lot to take care of patients like this, to stay up to date with the newest medicines, the newest technology, the newest tests. Once you get beyond that, it gets difficult. I mean, it's hard to be an expert on absolutely everything. Right, it's more important, I think, to know or for most doctors to know what's going to kill most Americans. And that's where our training goes.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? So we've talked about, the show. So what we're going to do is roll a clip real quick so that everyone watching could have an idea of what it is that we've been referencing.
Oh,
so let's
thank
roll.
you. That's great.
What if social media could save lives? Right now, there are literally millions of people struggling with undiagnosed medical conditions.
I'm Brittany, Kamaya's mom. She's 6 years old. She's paralyzed anywhere from 3 to 20 seconds, over 300 times a day.
I was in the Gulf War. I served 8 years, and now I'm losing my memory.
Every time the deja vu happens, I feel my eyes roll in the back of my head, and then I flatline.
Sadie has this incurable disease that the only thing you can do is, remove half of her brain. How could that be the only thing you do to a kid?
My body is going through something. The doctors are like, we can't help you.
I want to know if somebody else has this.
They need something different, the kind of thinking that happens usually outside the hospital. I'm Dr. Lisa Sanders, and I'm a physician at Yale. And for the past 15 years, I've written a column for the New York Times Magazine about patients who have mysterious symptoms, but I always wanted to go the next step. Using the internet, we have the ability to harness all the intelligence of people around the planet to get some answers.
I was thrilled to see that many responses.
It's what we hoped for.
Never, ever, ever give up.
There is somebody out there that understands.
The symptoms align perfectly with the things that I've experienced.
There's another mom out there like me that was looking for an answer. We're not the only ones.
You gotta keep a positive attitude.
It's good news.
We can create a movement. There's hope.
1, 2. Are you trying to kick me?
No! I did not do it on purpose.
I know.
Okay, we have to take a break. Ya regresamos. This is the official BDI podcast, el programa oficial de Best Doctors Insurance.
You are tuning into BDI Weekly, the official podcast of Best Doctors Insurance.
Este es el programa de Best Doctors Insurance.
Here, we discuss the best in health insurance,
Los temas más interesantes de salud médica,
medical mysteries, diagnosis, and world topics.
Best Doctors Insurance, a inovação e assistência médica.
Willie Bermuda is back with you. Aquí seguimos, and we're here with Dr. Lisa Sanders, a star of the #1 Netflix show, Diagnosis. She's also the Associate Professor of Medicine at Yale University. So, Doctor, in the show, you and your team use many different tools to arrive at the proper diagnosis that are really difficult to get to. In some of that, you use social media and you use a crowdsourcing model to help find these things of these really unheard of conditions. How did the idea for the column and then translate into the show? How did that come about?
Well, I've been writing this column for the New York Times since 2002. It's called Diagnosis. And in it, I tell the story of somebody who seeks medical attention with really strange symptoms that they can't figure out. And usually their doctor can't figure out. So that's the beginning of the little mystery story of making a diagnosis. And I thought, so many people wanted to try and figure it out. I thought, wouldn't it be, I hate to say fun, but cool or interesting to let my readers try to figure this out? And so I would tell a story. There are always solved cases in the column. And I would tell the story up to the point right before the doctor is able to make the diagnosis and stop. And I would say to my readers, what do you think this is? And people would write in with what they said. And I mean, hundreds of people would write in. It was crazy. It was great. And then the next day I would write the end of the story. I would put in the end of the story, which gave the answer and how the doctors made the diagnosis. It was a very popular column, and it ran for 6 years until I just got to be, it was too much.
It's too much.
So I stopped.
Yeah, hey, it happens.
Scott Rudin, as a producer in New York, saw my column and thought it would make great television. And he was totally, totally right. It made great television.
And it's helpful at the same time, because, you know, it's one thing to have good ratings, but it's helpful. I mean, and it's beneficial. So that column served as the blueprint for everything, really. I can understand better the crowdsourcing component, because it's basically being able to gather data from different people, from different places where there's no real database.
One of the things we know about diagnosis is that the person who's most likely to make the right diagnosis when it's difficult is the person who's seen it before. So, you know, sure, doctors have seen more illnesses than most people, but, you know, people who have had a disease, and all of their friends and family, they also recognize a disease. And so why not ask people who have other kinds of experience besides book learning about what they thought it might be? And I thought it was a successful experiment. I mean, it's not something that you could reproduce in real life, I don't think.
Right.
You know, because, you know, we had the power of the New York Times, which brought in thousands of responses that we would go through.
Right.
So I don't know that it's a useful model in medicine, but it does reveal some important stuff about diagnosis. And it also, I thought, revealed something about how difficult it is to be a patient.
Right. And tell me about your students. I have to imagine that having you as a professor is so much more than just any other professor. I think you're arming them, you're equipping them with you know, this next level, you know, awareness, you know, and experience. I think that's invaluable.
Well, you know, I have to say, my colleagues, you know, I did my training at the program where I now teach at Yale. And, you know, all of the teachers who taught me gave me incredibly important and valuable information, and they role modeled for me how to do it. And that's what I hope to provide for the residents and medical students who study with me. Show them what I've learned from other people, what I've learned from my teachers, and what I've learned from my experience, and help them become the doctor that they want to be.
I'll tell you what, if I was ever going to go into medicine, I'd rather end up in your classroom.
Well, it's never too late, Willie. Never too late.
That's right. Well, I'm a little older than 36, but you're right. It's never too late. It's never too late. Doctor, tell me about this COVID-19, you know, pandemic. I mean, how has that complicated, I don't know, things as far as these diagnoses, these processes? Like, I mean, have you noticed anything, you know, more unusual?
Oh my God. I mean, COVID-19 has been so insane. I mean, the disease that it's usually likened to, the flu. I mean, the flu presents pretty much the same way most of the time. You know, people get fevers, people get malaise, they get a cough, they feel just awful. And, you know, it's pretty predictable. But COVID-19 hasn't been like that at all. You know, first, sure, it started off with a cough and then became a pneumonia, but it has so many other presentations. You know, it can affect your gut. You can just have like diarrhea. It can affect your brain. You can have a kind of meningitis. It can affect, you know, all parts of the body. And that makes it really different and really special, and an incredible diagnostic difficulty, you know, and it's brand new. You know, right. I mean, it's not like we've had years dealing with the flu. This is a brand new illness. I mean, it's crazy, and it's been terrifying for doctors. It's been terrifying for most patients, you know, and it's been terrifying for all of us who are trying not to get it. You know, I mean, it's a scary disease, and it's not like the flu. It's true that many people have no symptoms. when they have COVID-19. And that's great for them and really bad for everybody that they interact with, because of course they might not know they have COVID, but they have it, they can spread it. So it's a really tough disease, and it's been really hard. Plus it's squeezed out so many other things. I mean, the first thing that, at least through March, April, May, June, July, anybody who was sick enough to come to the hospital, the first thing you thought of is, could this be COVID?
Right. Right. No, and it's still going on. People are catching colds, and that's exactly right. The first thought is maybe it's COVID. So I should get tested. Maybe it is. And maybe it is. But I always hear that it's really bad to head to the hospital. That's something should be like, emergency. Right? Because they're like, the way I understand it, there's double or triple the exposure.
That's not why you shouldn't go to the hospital. I mean, really, when everyone was saying don't go to the hospital, it was because the hospitals were overwhelmed. And there's still places in this country where hospitals are overwhelmed. When you look at, the hot spots right now are in the Midwest. And there was a story in the New York Times about, North Dakota or South Dakota, one of those places where, people just can't find a hospital bed to put their sick people, their sick loved ones in. So I think that the reason not to go to the hospital is, unless you're really sick, is the same reason. I mean, you should never go to the hospital unless you're really sick. But once you're really sick, you should go to the hospital assuming that there's room for you. I mean, in New York, we all saw those images of, people crowding out through the doors into the outside, people who are sick waiting to be seen in the emergency room. And so for that reason, it's a good time not to go to the hospital. But now, unless you're living in a hot spot, the hospital is a pretty safe place. We have learned, our learning curve was awful. Lots of people died. Lots of people got sick who shouldn't have gotten sick because we didn't know anything. I mean, we were learning on the fly.
Right. Yes, like the unknown.
Exactly. But I think it's much safer now, assuming that your hospital is not overwhelmed. When you're sick enough to go to the hospital, you should go to the hospital.
Right. And doctor, out of all these cases, from the show, but just in general cases, which has been the most impactful for you, or the one that you found the most complex or just out of this world that you would have never imagined really could have existed?
Well, I have to say, of course, people say, oh, which is your favorite column? And it's always whatever column I'm working on now is totally my favorite column. I've never had anything that was more interesting or more exciting. So having said that, I think the segment or the documentary in the series that affected me the most was the little girl who had these funny sort of drop attacks. Her name was Kamaya. And she had hundreds of times a day, she would just collapse for, 15 seconds or even less, and then get up and she would be fine. And they weren't seizures, they were this other thing. And it would happen to her hundreds of times a day. So she finally went to the NIH, the Undiagnosed Diseases Program, which is a fantastic resource. Oh my God, it's so amazing what these smart, well-resourced doctors can do. And they figured out that she had this genetic abnormality. And they gave her the name of the abnormality, and they said, we don't know anybody who has this. There was one paper published about 10 cases in China. But of course, they didn't list who those people were, and those people might not even speak English. And so one of the great things that came out of this documentary is her mom, Brittany, asked for a community. That's what she was looking for. People who had something like Kamaya. And she found a community. But it's more than that. So this documentary airs, and it's wonderful. I mean, she Kamaya has several friends who have exactly what she has. So now her mom sort of knows what to expect, knows what's going to happen, and they have each other to support. But there was a family in Queens, New York, watching the show, and their son has this disease. But what's really interesting about this is that well before this boy ever had a name for his disease, they had found a treatment that kept him from having most of these attacks. So he used to have hundreds of attacks, just like Kamaya. And he started taking this medicine, sort of lucky. And suddenly those attacks stopped. And so he reached out, his family reached out to Kamaya's family. And so now that whole community of people who have this kind of genetic abnormality are taking this medication, and it's really improved the quality of their lives. I mean, to me, that's the real power of, crowds.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically everyone became everyone's support system and educational system. And now, yeah, her quality of life has to be better.
So much better, and so many other people's lives also so much better because of this. So, that to me, that was such an important lesson. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that, it took, a newspaper that has millions of subscribers and a television network that has millions of subscribers, and we were able to help, 20 kids, but still, their lives,
right.
Their lives have been changed forever.
Absolutely.
For the better.
Yeah, because if you didn't have the column, you didn't have the series, and you had nothing, there's a big chance that none of those 20 kids would have been helped. So
right.
It's wow, it's definitely impactful. And how do you deal with the emotional toll of it all? I mean, is it like sort of like a police officer or firefighter? You're exposed to a lot of traumatic, elements where you just have to sort of deal with it. And then later on, you just start to become desensitized a little bit.
I don't think I'm desensitized. I think, the opportunity to help people is always a great opportunity. And I don't, I wish that I could fix everybody, but that's not medicine. That's not medicine as we know it now. But if I can help, I hope I help all my patients, but if I can really help just most of them, then that's successful. And I don't even expect that much from, my writing. In writing these columns, I had basically two goals. One was to persuade lots of really smart kids that going into medicine and becoming a doctor, a diagnostician, was the right thing to do. That would be cool and fun. And my second goal was really to give everybody who's Googling with symptoms, give a disease a clear presentation so that people might be able to recognize themselves. And I have to say, not a month goes by that I don't get an email from somebody who says, thanks, I was Googling this, I found your column, I took it to my doctor, and it helped me get a diagnosis. And that's, what's better than that?
Nothing, right? Nothing, absolutely nothing. That's absolutely helping. That's helping humanity. I mean, I could go on and on, but I'll tell you, us here at Best Doctors, we recognize what you're doing. We're very proud of what you're doing.
I used to consult for a show called House, which was based on my column, at least in part. And the one thing that drove me crazy about House, well, there was more than one thing. I loved that show, but there was more than one thing that made me crazy. Like, how could that guy be such a jerk? And yet, he was so great. He was so great. But one of the things about that show that made me crazy is that it looked like only one guy was able to figure these things out. And in fact, the world of medicine is filled with doctors who want to make diagnoses, who do make important diagnoses all the time. It's not just one guy.
Right, correct. No, absolutely.
Especially not one cranky guy.
Yeah, he's and I think he's a British guy, right? He's a British actor, actually.
Oh yeah, Hugh Laurie. He was so fabulous, I must say.
Yeah.
You know, I have to tell you, when the producer who came up with the show first called me and asked me if I wanted to be part of it, I said, well, tell me what this show is. And he says, well, it's about an arrogant, irritable, drug-addicted doctor who hates patients and loves diagnosis. And of course, I said, oh, that's great. But in my mind, I was thinking, who would watch a show like that? That sounds terrible.
Right.
And then they sent me the pilot with Hugh in it. And somehow, I don't know how, but somehow he is, despite his crusty exterior, he is somebody that you like and care about. I don't know how.
Yeah,
but,
right.
And he actually does care about patients. It's amazing that Hugh, but it's because Hugh was such a great actor.
Yeah, great actor.
That.
Great show, right? No, yeah. I mean, like I watched it for a few seasons, like maybe two seasons or something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But definitely, yeah, it was this guy. He's personally had all these problems, but it would usually translate to success for the patient. So
yes.
Definitely, no, but yes, I think that it's very important. Either way, like you steered the path. Like you opened up the path for all of this, and I think that's a great thing.
Thank you.
And really, I hope it continues. So you also published this great book that I've heard about called The Art of Being a Detective of Diagnosis, but it's called Every Patient Tells a Story, Medical Mysteries and the Art of Diagnosis. Tell me a little bit about that journey, and do you have any plans to write another book?
Well, in my book, I wanted to break down the process of making a diagnosis. I mean, I've always been fascinated by that process, and this gave me an opportunity to take it step by step. First getting the story and the physical exam and tests and thinking it through. So each section of the book is each step of the way to making a diagnosis and how that works. And, I really wanted to let people stand in my shoes at the bedside and see how that all worked, because I thought it's cool. I thought it was amazing and inspiring. It's inspiring to me, so I wanted to share that. So that's why I wrote that book. And then and then recently I just published a collection of my columns, about 50 of my columns, and I separated them. You don't get very many good ideas in life, really. And so in trying to think about how to put this book together, I had what I thought was a really great ideas. I would group them by symptom, so that, in one category, it was abdominal pain or headache or passing out or fever, just to show that you can have the exact same symptom, but end up with all these really different possible diseases. And so, if you come in with a fever, it might be an infection, but it could be cancer. It could be an allergy. It could be all kinds of things. And that's what is fascinating about medicine and about diagnosis.
It really is.
So that book is called Diagnosis, I think, Solving the Most Baffling Medical Mysteries.
So you want a little detective there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. 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 And
I'm definitely going to read it.
Great. And then you asked me about what I'm going to do next. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I'll tell you what I want to do next, and I just have to see if I can arrange it. Because, I have been fascinated by dermatology. Really? I love the idea that you could just walk into an exam room and know something important about what's going on inside a body by looking at the outside. So I'm going to see if I can figure out a way to get some extra training in dermatology. I don't want to be a dermatologist. I want to be an internist, but I want that skill in my pocket. I would love to take a year off and do a year of a dermatology residency, or 2 years or 3 years or whatever they would allow me to do, and really get deep into it and figure this out and figure out how I can teach it to other internists. That's one of the things I'm thinking about doing next. I just have to figure out how to get that done.
Doctor, there's no challenge big enough for you. That I know.
Keeps life interesting. You know what I mean?
It does. Set goals and, do your best to accomplish them. But I'm very happy to hear that, and I'm definitely going to read that book, and hopefully everybody reads that new book as well.
Well, thank you. I would love that.
Absolutely. Doctor, here at Best Doctors, there's a service, a tool that we use called interconsultation. And what that is, it's a second medical opinion service. So our members send it off, through as simple as a fax, really. Like any medical history, their medical records, along with the diagnosis. And then it gets, either confirmed by very reputable doctors, part of a very prestigious network, and they then in turn reply and either give a new diagnosis or confirm, the original. So very interesting that we do have.
Great idea. Sometimes the most important thing you can have in a diagnosis is a new set of eyes. So great.
Right. 2 doctors looking at it, 3, 4, better.
Absolutely.
Than just one. Well, doctor, I'll tell you, it's really been a fun time, to spend this time with you. All the positive things I can say about you, I think I said early on at the beginning. The only thing I can say is thank you very much, for joining me this afternoon, for being here with us on the show. It's much appreciated from, myself, everybody here, at Best Doctors Insurance. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Willie. This was really a delight. It was a fun conversation. So thanks.
Thank you. Our friends, that's our time. Thank you for joining us this afternoon on the official BDI podcast, el programa oficial de Best Doctors Insurance. Tune in every week for a new episode. Los episodios siguen cada semana. Y connect with us anytime on social media, en todas las redes sociales, y en bestdoctorsinsurance.com. Have a great day, and don't text and drive.